So good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar this evening. I am Rebecca Russell-Turner, a consultant for the MA in Fashion Business Management at IIT. And tonight's guest is Susie Potts, and she's joining us from the UK. So welcome to you, Susie.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Lovely to see you. So some background about Susie and I. We're very good friends, and we met in Vietnam, and we both worked at London College of Design and Fashion and taught fashion there, and that's a couple of years ago. And we're here to talk about, is it possible to be fashion conscious and fashionable and be a lover of fashion and to be sustainable at the same time? It's a contentious issue in the press. It's confusing, it's very worrying. And so we just want to have a talk, and I'm going to ask Susie questions that we've been rehearsing today earlier. And if you have questions yourself, then you're quite welcome to put some questions in the chat box, so we can answer your questions as best as possible. So thank you for being here on time, and we're going to start now. So Susie, I've just explained how we met in Vietnam.
Yes.
So do you want to tell me a bit about your background?
Okay, so I have been teaching for about 13 years. And I recently started my own website about sustainable living. So it includes fashion, but it's also about sustainable travel, products. So products that kind of avoid plastic and healthy and organic food. And I am an advocate for clean beauty, which means no chemicals, a waste-free and plastic-free planet, slow travel, and sustainable fashion.
And Susie, you began your sustainability journey. Well, you didn't begin it here, but you actually studied ethical fashion in an MA. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Just plugging in, sorry. Phone is dying on me. Yeah, so I've got a master's from University of Creative Arts in Epsom. And I undertook that as a sort of part-time master's whilst I was working as a full-time curriculum manager at Colchester Institute. So I kind of really had an interest in ethical fashion, which started when I was working in Africa, actually, which was a few years ago. I worked as an NGO in a rural training centre in Zimbabwe, and it was a kind of an environment that was free from any pollution, really. There was no light pollution, we had no electricity, there were very few distractions, and it was a very kind of natural lifestyle, which I really loved.
Yeah, and so when you first kind of went into the fashion industry, you were a stylist. So tell us about your styling career.
So I did a degree in Middlesex University in fashion textiles, and after that I worked for a couple of years with a friend who was a stylist, and I assisted her on various sort of music videos and other sort of projects. So we did a Pasadena's video together. I did some work for her on a Kylie Minogue video. So I did all sorts of different things really working with her, and that was for a couple of years. And then I decided that I wanted to do something with my degree that felt to me that was a little bit more, if you like, sustainable, something that kind of wasn't sort of like fast fashion. I wanted to do something a little bit more kind of solid with my degree, and that's why I ended up going to Africa to teach out there. Yeah.
So tell us the name of your website, Susie.
So my website is a play on my name, which is Susie. So it's called Sustainable. So it's SUZ and then sustainable.com.
So everyone have a quick look at that now while Susie's talking to us, and have a look through her work. But you went from one extreme to another. You went from working in the fashion industry as a stylist and like dressing Kylie Minogue to rejecting that kind of culture, and then going to live in Africa and living in a hut with no electricity and working with the fashion textiles there. So tell us about that.
So quite a contrast. Sorry, what was the question? Sorry, I missed the question.
So tell us about that. There was this contrasting lifestyle. You went from being in the UK and working as a stylist, and then you went into Africa to work in Africa. Tell us about some of the work you're working with fashion in Africa as well.
Yeah, so I worked with a small production team who made garments, which we sold because we had to sort of make our own money to sort of keep the training centre going. And then we opened a shop, which was in the nearest growth point, which meant there were more people, and we had to train someone up to kind of manage the shop, which was a real kind of cultural sort of difficulty, actually, because we chose all of the girls that worked in the production team were women. And so we chose a woman to work in the shop, which was culturally quite unacceptable, actually, because normally it's a very male-dominated sort of culture. So that was very interesting, but we succeeded and it was really good. And I also started working with different women's cooperatives, teaching them how to do different textile techniques and also production so that they could also, sort of make money for themselves to survive. Because most of the people there were subsistence farmers, which meant that, they relied on the weather. So there was no rain, there was droughts, and their crops didn't grow. So it was a bit of a sort of difficult cycle for some people. So they wanted to learn a kind of trade, a skill that they could use that was transferable throughout their lives. And so the sewing skills and the textile skills, what helped them sort of survive, really.
Amazing. And so after you went to Africa, then you decided to go and do your MA in ethical fashion. And could you describe what that, what is ethical fashion, and how did you study it? You said you're part-time.
So what happened really was that I decided to do a master's because while I was living in Zimbabwe, I kind of chanced upon this recipe book using natural kind of indigenous plants and local flora. And this kind of idea of using natural dyes was really in stark contrast to the sort of noxious chemical dyes that I'd been using with these women's groups. And they were kind of full of these toxic chemicals. They were a mixture of corrosive caustic soda and another chemical called sodium hydrosulfite, which I researched later and found out that when you inhale these chemicals, they can cause severe irritation to the mucous membranes and the upper respiratory tract. And I suffer quite a lot from coughs and colds. And I kind of still wonder to this day whether part of that reason is because of these chemicals that we were using without any kind of protective clothing or masks, or, there were no warnings on things. The health and safety in Africa was, sort of very kind of non-existent really compared to kind of more Western, our Western country where we're very obsessed with health and safety here. So and that's really what got me started on my master's. And so when I did the master's, my real focus was on the chemicals that are used in the fashion industry. So, from pesticides for growing cotton and other kind of fabrics, quite, right through to sort of the manufacturing process, and then the sort of, toxic finishes that are used on fabrics. So like different kind of, anti-wrinkle, all sorts of different kind of other kind of chemical processes are used at the end of the fabric, sort of, once it's created. And then there's the sewing and the sort of work, the actual kind of making and manufacturing, and how kind of the problems that relate to that. So the working conditions, the fact that a lot of staff are exploited, especially women, they're not able to join sort of unions and kind of have a voice of their own. And there are many sort of like difficult issues within the industry. And it was good to learn about all of this. And I kind of translated that into kind of what I was doing work-wise. So I created a website that was about education and spreading the word. And my students got involved in my sort of projects as a sort of an awareness campaign about the chemicals and about the industry as a whole. We did, sort of also related things to sort of like, the use of fur in the fashion industry, and we did an anti-fur campaign. So it was all very educational, and it was a resource for other educators at the same time.
Yeah, and you at this time you were working full time and studying part-time. How did you manage that balance? How did you?
Well, I had one day a week where I had to go into university. And I was very lucky actually, because my work gave me the time to do that, because they believed in, you know, the qualification, and they felt that it would be very useful for me and for the universities as you know, as a sort of progression. And I studied sort of that one day, and then evenings and weekends. Yeah, so I didn't have much of a social life for about 2 years. It was. But the thing is, I think if you really enjoy something, you know, I enjoyed the research, I enjoyed doing the work. So if it's a subject that you kind of really feel passionate about, you don't mind spending all of that time and energy working on it. And, you know, I really enjoyed doing my master's, and I really feel that it has benefited me in the long run. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for having done my master's.
Yeah, and how do you think, like, how does a master's change somebody, do you think? Like, if you go from BA to MA, like,
yeah,
you know,
I think it kind of makes you a master of your own career. It gives you sort of opportunities, and you know, it's obviously educational, but you can explore your own subject in more detail, and you can take it in whichever direction you want to. You know, for me, it was the foundation of starting my website, because I don't just talk about fashion on my website. In fact, I haven't really talked about fashion that much. I focused really on, you know, my life experiences whilst living in Vietnam. And one of those was to kind of avoid the use of plastic. So I did a lot of research into kind of alternatives to plastic, and, you know, sort of the issues with plastic, you know, sort of globally. So, yeah, it's kind of taken me off in a very different direction, because now I'm working for myself. And I'm learning every day, whereas rather before that I was teaching every day. So it's, you know, it's a complete kind of turnaround.
Yeah. And do you think that studying a master's made you feel a lot more self-directed and self-motivated?
Yes, definitely. I mean, you know, the whole point of a master's is learning about a subject and knowing about it thoroughly. And, you know, that is generally the basis for learning more and kind of going off in different pathways. You know, I just taught fashion before. I didn't know much about sustainability, but now when I teach fashion, I do promote sustainability, because, you know, the people that we teach are the designers of the future, and they're the ones that are going to make the difference in the future, because we need creative people to find solutions to the issues that we see, you know, that we have today.
Absolutely. And so other organisations that you're involved with are Parley TV.
Yes. So it's a company called Parley for the Oceans, and they're an organisation that sort of believe that the power of change lies in our hands. So the hands of the consumer, but also the hands of the creative industries. And they are sort of promoting what they actually believe, that plastic is a design failure, and that it can only be solved if we reinvent the material itself. And to create change, we need to stop producing more virgin plastic right away. We need to stop that right now. And we need to use upcycled marine plastic waste and recycle plastic wherever we can. And so their sort of mantra really is to avoid plastic wherever possible, to intercept plastic waste, so that's recycling it and reusing it, and then to redesign the material itself. So it's a really interesting organisation, and I think, you know, they've really hit the nail on the head. You know, we need to do all of those three things. We need to stop using plastic, we need to stop making more of it, because we're never going to get rid of it, and we need to use what we've got. We need to be resourceful. You know, we are creative, resourceful, you know, human beings. You know, we should be able to find a solution for the issues that we have today. And so, yeah, it's the way forward.
And also you're a volunteer at the Good Earth Growers.
Yes, that is a local organic farm, and I've just started volunteering there in their edible flowers division. So they grow sort of organic food, and I am really interested in foraging, and obviously sort of learning more about edible plants, you know, for me is a really interesting kind of personal kind of growth because I do quite a lot of cooking now with foraged food, and I'm learning, sort of more and more about it. I've done a few courses, but this will also help me about the sort of practicalities of growing food organically. So that's why I'm kind of volunteering for that.
That sounds amazing that you can have, eat flowers.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's lots of flowers. In fact,
the flowers? Have you tried any flowers?
Well, I mean, when you just go for a walk along the hedgerows in the UK, there's actually so many things that you can eat that you would never have known. You'd think they're just weeds, but they're not. And so, learning about sort of some of these foods, some of them are quite medicinal as well. They have medicinal properties. So it's been really interesting, and it's again something that I really am enjoying writing about. So, I much rather work for myself and learn about the things that I'm interested in than to work for somebody else 9 to 5 doing something that I'm not as interested in. So for me, this is the perfect sort of career choice. And yeah, I couldn't have done it if I hadn't have done my master's, and if I hadn't have been in Vietnam, I probably wouldn't have been doing it either. So yeah, I'm really lucky and fortunate to have had the experiences I've had.
So Susie, can you just explain what is sustainable fashion?
Yes. So unfortunately, fashion by definition means change, which is in itself sort of unsustainable. But very few products really fulfill the concept of sustainability in their entirety, because actually what that means is that they would require the production of the clothing to be absorbed back into the environment when it's reached the end of its life. So the definition of sustainability is the conservation of life through ecological balance. So that's human, animal, vegetable, and planetary. And it really kind of means sourcing and production that don't pollute through the process of manufacture, and also don't deplete non-renewable resources, whether those are planetary or human. So that is the definition of sustainable fashion.
Thank you very much. And what is the difference between sustainable fashion and ethical fashion?
So, well, today, I mean, ethical fashion really is, it's a kind of a consumer's expectation that sustainability will extend to social systems. So it means that brands take into account the workers that work behind the scenes to make sort of, the clothing industry possible. So that's from the farmers who are sort of growing the crops, and the things like sort of things we want to avoid are things like use of pesticides, which can, poison the farmers themselves, and also can create massive debt. So issues like that. So it's trying to avoid issues like that. But it's also about, the garment workers who are making the clothing and making sure that they, they have a living wage, enough money to buy the necessities in life and as well as food, and that they're not exploited or treated in a really bad in a bad way, or that they're working in safe conditions. So I don't know if you've heard of the Fashion Revolution, but that was an organization that was set up basically in response to a massive industrial kind of catastrophe, which was the plaza buildings that the many people were working within the fashion industry, which collapsed. They were dangerous. The owners knew that they were dangerous. They did nothing about it. Eventually they collapsed and killed and maimed many people. So it's about being aware of, the issues and making sure that everybody has the right to a safe and working environment as well. But it's really about fashion that creates good and avoids harm, and whether that's to people, planet, or to animals.
So we've defined sustainable fashion and ethical fashion. What about slow fashion? Is that a combination of both?
Yeah, so slow, well, it's not really a combination of both. It's about sort of like longevity. It's about environmental, social, and economic systems being designed in a way that they there's a balance to them and they can be maintained into the future. So slow fashion, or slow sort of, is about slow consumption, really. It's about good quality clothes that are sustainable, made to last, that are not like fast fashion, which, sort of are here today and gone within 6 weeks that you're going to throw away. They're things that you can sort of love and treasure and they're a staple in your wardrobe. You can put them together with different things to sort of style them in different ways, but they will be there still in 10 years time, and they're really good quality, they're good fabrics, that they're made sustainably, obviously, but they might cost a little bit more, but they're not going to be thrown away in 6 weeks like fast fashion. It's not going to be here today and gone tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you, Susie. So Susie, how can we be more sustainable if we love fashion?
Well, I think the main thing about being sustainable is the fact that, we as consumers, we have a choice. So we have a choice as to sort of what we buy. If we want to be sustainable, sometimes it takes a bit of homework to find the brands that are sustainable. But obviously it's worth it. At the moment, you can't just walk down the high street or your local street and find every other shop being a sustainable brand, because they're not. But if you buy local, that's good. But really it's knowing about the supply chain. It's a brand that has transparency, a brand that is telling you what they're doing and why and how they're doing it. They're not hiding anything. They're not greenwashing you. And they put their money where their mouth is, basically. So I think the first thing about being sustainable is that the first step really is about building awareness, knowing what is sustainable, being willing to change as a consumer and buy sustainable fashion rather than fast fashion, and making your voice heard. There are many organizations like Fashion Revolution that I already mentioned, where you can participate. You can write to brands and ask them, what's in my clothes, who have made these clothes, what are the conditions. You can ask those questions, and you can be part of the system that is making things, making changes, that making people accountable. So, but there are other things that you can do as well. You can rewear things, so you can not throw things away. You can upcycle them, you can make them into other things. You can recycle them. You can do swap shops, swap with your friends. There are lots of initiatives, even on Fashion Revolution, as to how you go about having a swap shop event. And you can buy pre-loved clothing. So this month it's Secondhand September, which is an Oxfam initiative, where for the whole month of September you don't buy any new clothes. So maybe sort of in September you have with your friends, you get together and you do a clothing swap. So everybody kind of just swaps the clothes for you can get something new that way. So, I think, those are the main things I think that you can do. Because I think together we have kind of, we have impact, we can have impact, we have the ability to choose. So if we say no to sort of fast fashion brands, you're taking a step in the right direction.
Yeah. And, before COVID, every high street in the UK had, 4 or 5 charity shops.
Yep.
And there's no stigma in the UK about buying from a charity shop. It's actually very, very, very cool.
It is actually, yeah.
So it's kind of like you more like to show off and say, well, I got this and it was an absolute bargain from a charity shop. To try and show off and say, I've got this luxury piece of clothing with a logo on it.
I think it is, because it shows your creativity. You're dressing sort of, in a very individual way, because you're not, the one person that's bought one of 10,000 of the same garment in H&M. So it shows your creativity. It shows your kind of your own way of styling. I bought this top when I went to Bristol recently, and this was from a secondhand shop. So, and you can get, it's cheaper generally. It's cheaper than even the fast fashion. So it maybe not be a craze that's taken on yet in Sri Lanka, but, you guys could be the ones that actually start that new sort of initiative.
Yeah, the vintage initiative.
Yeah, why not? So, I mean, you can buy vintage online as well. So although obviously that means, you're using sort of more energy for sort of sending things overseas, but there's no reason why you couldn't do that. But I think part of making sustainability true is about, as I said, brands having transparency. And today, a lot of brands are also using sort of third-party certifications, which are earning consumer sort of trust. And there are many of those, all for different sort of areas. So, for example, there's the Global Organic Textile Standard, which ensures that fabrics are made, sort of in an organic sort of method, which means it has to be sort of made without any chemicals for at least 3 years. So the soil hasn't had any chemical kind of interaction in over 3 years for it to be kind of organic. But there are lots of different things that relate to sort of organic production, which if you're interested, you can look that up. But that's a really sort of well-known global standard. You can kind of be assured that your fabric is organic. Blue design is for the manufacturing phase. There's also Fair Wear Foundation that's based in Europe, and that's a certification that focuses on practical changes for garment workers using European production. There's the Oeko-Tex standard, which again tells you that the textiles themselves don't contain any toxic chemicals, and that's quite important. And then there's also the Textile Exchange's Global Recycled Standard, which is to verify the use of recycled materials. So there are numerous different sort of third-party certifications. And there are also certifications for sort of social kind of well-being as well, and for the whole business as a sort of whole, which is one called B Corp certification, and that measures a company's entire social and environmental performance, and it evaluates how a company's operations and business model impacts on their workers, their community, the environment as well. And they are one of the sort of highest standards in terms of the supply chain within the fashion industry, but also other industries as well. So they're not just the fashion industry. They also look at the kind of materials that are used, and they also give charitable donations, and employee benefits are supported by transparency and accountability requirements. So they work towards reduced inequality and lower levels of poverty as well, and a healthier environment all around, basically.
Yeah.
So they want to look out for.
We're talking about sustainability, and we can't ignore addressing the plastic problem, which is huge.
Yeah.
So we all know that there is a huge plastic problem globally.
Yeah.
And then there's kind of like there's all these debates on whether it should be recycled or what would happen to it if it's not recycled. And
there's quite an interesting conversation going on at the moment about recycled polyester, because it's interesting because 10 years ago it was seen as a miracle fabric, sort of recycling plastic bottles. And the tide is turning today, but there are kind of solutions that are kind of in development. But I think with any fabric, if you look at the industry as a whole, there are kind of pros and cons. Nothing is 100% sustainable. So even a fabric, like recycled polyester, it has really positives, many positives, but there are downsides as well, which is the microplastics. But they reuse existing plastic. They're part of the solution to, what the waste problem. There are sort of, many other sort of benefits to that as well. It keeps plastic from ending up in landfill or polluting the ocean. And then obviously, over there about sort of plastic pollution, what's happened recently. It also lessens our dependence on petroleum as a source of raw materials, because it's not virgin polyester, which does use petrochemicals. And the quality of recycled polyester is almost the same as virgin polyester, and it requires 59% less energy compared to virgin polyester. And according to a study in 2017, which I was looking at recently, for the Swiss Federal Office of the Environment, it actually generates 79% less carbon emissions than producing its virgin counterpart. So, it really scores quite highly. And, brands, companies, organisations like Parley for the Oceans, they are promoting the use of recycled polyester still, because there isn't, a 100% sustainable alternative. So, Nothing really in terms of sustainability is very straightforward. There are usually multiple layers of complexity. So, the best thing to do is really to do your research. Try to avoid being greenwashed by, companies that are saying they're doing all the right things, but they're not.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about greenwashing, because
we're going to talk about greenwashing in a minute, but I just want to kind of go and just sort out the different plastics. So we've got single-use plastic, and then we've got virgin plastic, and that virgin plastic can be recycled. Is that correct?
Well, so virgin plastic is the first time a plastic is made using petrochemicals. It's not recycled, but you can, in terms of single use, it means it's used once and thrown away. So normally, like if you go shopping, buy a plastic bag, it would be thrown away. But that can be made from recycled plastic as well. So plastic bottles, some are virgin plastic, others are made from recycled plastic. And if you then use those plastic bottles to create a fabric, it's called rPET, which is recycled PET bottles, recycled plastic bottles. And that can be recycled time and time again, but the quality eventually dissipates over time. So it can't be, sort of infinitely kind of recycled. It has a time sort of, limit on that as well.
Yeah. And there's plastic in everything. I mean, from anything that stretches really in a garment is going to have plastic in it.
Yeah. So I mean, 50% of the garments worn today are made of plastic, because plastic is very versatile, and anything with a stretch, as you say, we tend to wear kind of leggings or stretchy trousers or athleisure wear. We're more kind of, interested in something that's more comfortable than we are in buying something that is organic cotton. And unfortunately, with plastic, with fabrics made with plastic, they do shed microfibers. So that is the downside, but they're much more comfortable. They're more hard wearing. But you can wash them in low temperatures as well. You can hand wash them. And there are kind of things that you can put into the washing machine to capture the microplastics before they enter the water systems. So there are kind of, very simple, practical things that we can do. There's something called a Cora ball, which sits in the washing machine when you wash in it, and that kind of captures all of the microfibers. You can put a filter on your washing machine these days. And I think, maybe in 4 or 5 years' time, when we buy new washing machines, they'll already come with the filters. But at the moment, people are only just becoming aware of the situation and how bad it is. And, only now starting to really think about solutions to the issue of microplastics. So I think, in time things will change. But at the moment, as a consumer, you're not going to throw away all your gym kit and stop going to the gym, because that's just, it's not an ideal situation. That's not going to happen. You need to live your life still. So, a guppy bag or a Cora ball, these are things that you can use. The other thing is you don't, if you don't need to, you don't need to wash your clothes as often. We get it in our head that we wear something once, it needs to be washed. It's not necessary. Maybe if you live in a hot climate and you've been out sort of exercising, yes, but we all kind of tend to throw our clothes in the washing machine, I think, more often than we really need to. So
yeah, but the plastic problem really is really been driven by plastic bottles, hasn't it? More than the fashion industry, do you think?
Yeah, so I would say that I'm not really sure when plastic bottles were invented, but maybe it was like sort of in the 90s. I don't know really. But yes, so ever since then, we've kind of decided that tap water is not not as good as sort of spring water or wherever the water comes from, and that we're better off drinking it out of a bottle. But actually that is not true, because the plastic can actually leach, especially if it's put in a hot, if it's in a hot sort of place, it's left in the sun. That plastic can leach into the water itself. So actually it's not that healthy at all. And you can filter the water from your tap. So it's not necessary to drink spring water or water from a bottle. I don't. I put essential oils into my water and it tastes lovely. But if I don't do that, I can taste the chemicals though. So, you can put a simple piece of charcoal into water and that will filter out all the toxins. So that's another thing. It's very easy to do.
Yeah, I think over the last 20 years, we've just seen this huge increase in consumerism in fashion and how we live. And just to kind of make the audience aware of the choices they have, because there's been social pressure surrounding it. So there was a point where you go to a restaurant, you know, and it would be unacceptable to say, can I just have a tap water? You'd have to choose sparkling water or filter or water. So it became part of the norm that we'll just, we need to, this is what our choices are.
I mean, that's successful marketing.
Successful marketing.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean, it's successful marketing. Yeah, and you know, we are living in a consumerist world. You know, we take, even if we're not aware of it, you know, we sort of absorb this kind of information through marketing, you know, and it starts to impact on us whether we realize it even or not, you know. And so that's basically what it is. You know, we don't need to drink bottled water. You know, there's no need to. You know, in most countries, you know, the water is perfectly safe to drink from the tap. So it's gone through a process. It's filtered. It's gone through a process that makes it safe.
Yeah, or you can get a water putter, and it feels like the same time that bottled water was pushed out into the market, it was the same kind of fast fashion. And so it feels like we've been living in this like galloping rate of speed for like 20 years.
Yeah, but I mean, it really all started with the Industrial Revolution, you know, where things could suddenly be sort of automated and made, you know, without the need for sort of humans, or made quicker and faster. And suddenly that sort of accelerated, and we want more, and we need, you know, you know, all this marketing thrown at us means that, you know, we become sort of like, you know, susceptible to sort of peer pressure, and we've got to have this and we've got to have that. Otherwise our lives aren't worth it, and we're not worth it, you know. And it's, you know, I think the invention of actually the mobile phone is probably, you know, the worst invention ever, because, you know, that is kind of what is keeping us kind of, you know, showing our friends what we've got, what we've done, you know, just, you know, are we really living these happy lives, or are we just kind of showing off, you know, what we think other people want to see? I mean, you know, this is the pressure of the life today, especially maybe not for my generation so much, but definitely for younger generations, you know, my sort of nieces and nephews. I'm all too aware of, you know, the peer pressure that sort of, you know, that they're kind of under, basically.
Yeah, I heard stories of young people feeling like they had to wear a different top every time they're on social media, so they look like they've got clothes. Whereas it maybe would be cooler now to turn up wearing the same top and start to kind of say, this is my, you know, wardrobe is a bit more compact, and I'm happy to show that I you know, I believe in my own style rather than kind of being consumer driven and trend driven.
Yeah. There are actually websites now where you can buy virtual garments. So, you know, basically you buy a sort of virtual garment and you can use that on Instagram. So it looks like you're wearing this designer outfit that you've not bought, but you've kind of bought a virtual version of it. So you're not even wearing it. So that's the extreme that it's gone to.
This is a virtual outfit. I don't know if you can tell.
It looks quite real to me.
So we talked about pets, and we talked about microfibers, and we talked about which labels you recommend. So let's talk about greenwashing. Susie, what is greenwashing? What's the definition?
So the fashion industry is kind of run by big businesses that are orientated towards making high volumes of cheap products. And the pressure to kind of produce cheaply kind of prevents a lot of companies from making the kind of changes that they really need to be greener. And there's a temptation by bigger brands to make environmentally friendly collections, like sort of H&M, for example. They'll make a handful of products and market those as green, and kind of makes them think that they're being sustainable. And so really it becomes nothing more than a catchphrase or a gimmick, as opposed to, you know, the real concern for the environment. And it really kind of refers, greenwashing is really the process of conveying a false impression or providing misleading information about a company's products and how they're environmentally sound. So it could be through adverts, campaigns, or using marketing spin. So it's kind of unsubstantiated or exaggerated kind of claims that actually are kind of used to deceive customers into believing that the company's products are environmentally friendly and beneficial. So that's kind of what it is. It's a way of conning people into buying something. You know, they might have it's a play on the word whitewashing, actually, which means using misleading information to gloss over bad behavior, which is exactly what they're doing.
And what about when greenwashing, when it goes a bit too extreme?
Yeah.
So what do you feel about that? Do you think?
Well, I mean, you know, the thing is, there are lots of terms that can be used, you know, for all sorts of products. So for fashion, for example, you can a brand can use the term natural. So cotton, for example, is natural, but cotton can be made, you know, conventional cotton is made with huge tons of like pesticides, which are not natural, they're chemicals. It uses a lot of water, and the end product, although it's a natural, it's made from a plant, it's gone through lots of processes which make it very unnatural at the end. So, you know, it's a very sort of deceiving word. You know, what does natural mean? It's very vague. It doesn't necessarily mean that the end product is kind of, you know, sort of healthy and, you know, or it's not organic necessarily, you know, it's not organic. So words like that can be used, you know, really to sort of mislead people. I mean, I think, you know, that in terms of greenwashing, the best thing to do is to really kind of think about the price that you're paying. So if you're paying a really low price point, you need to sort of interrogate that brand. You need to think about sort of, you know, how much is the company that you're buying from paying the person that's made it? You know, what values are you contributing in making a purchase if you're buying something that's really cheap? And look at the language that the brand is using. So are they using language that's hard to understand? Do they evade kind of using detailed language around a topic of sustainability? Do they use language in a way that markets itself as being environmentally sort of friendly or sociably concerned, but without actually giving any details as to how, you know, they're backing this information up? You know, they need to sort of be transparent. They need to show you what they're doing and how they're, you know, making an impact. You know, they just band around a whole load of words that make it sound good. You know, eco-friendly. It doesn't actually mean anything. What is eco-friendly? There's no, you know, sort of, you know, sort of legal. It's not a legal term. It doesn't mean anything. You know, so you really need to look at the evidence to be kind of convinced that a company is actually doing what it says.
Yeah, and then the other way is when things go too extreme, and there's a kind of green bashing, and it goes, and people start to kind of throw this around and kind of up brands that perhaps aren't greenwashing as well.
I mean, I've had it myself when I've asked sort of innocent questions on Facebook sort of groups, some of my sustainable website groups for women in business. And someone just takes it the wrong way. And I think, you know, some people, you know, everyone lives their lives how they want to, but some people kind of, you know, kind of pull you up on things that if you're not doing them in the way that they're doing them, you know, if you're not kind of like, you know, living with a compost toilet, you know, and you know, there's various other things that, you know, that they might be doing, and you're not having the same exact values as them, then, you know, they feel that they can criticize people. But actually, you know, I think if everyone takes a step towards being sustainable, you know, you're doing something positive. And I actually, you know, I think it's really wrong for people to over criticize when you're trying to do something, when you're trying to make a difference, even if it's just, you've stopped using single-use plastic, that's one tick. You can add some more ticks to that later, but you're not taking a step in the right direction. You're making a difference. You might feel you're making a small difference, but if you look at the situation in the UK where supermarkets in 2015, I think it was, they started charging for single-use plastic bags. And now the statistics are that that has impacted by 90%. So 90% of plastic bags that were used, it saved 90% of plastic bags. So where one family would use 40 bags in a year, now that's now kind of driven down to just 4 bags per family in terms of them buying, new or I don't know, recycled plastic bags, but using single-use plastic basically. So, one person can make a difference just by doing one simple thing.
By going to the supermarket, perhaps, just have some tote bags or... Yeah,
exactly. Just, use a reusable bag, sometimes even a paper bag, if you've got some really good sturdy bags. And if you've got a plastic bag that you've used before, just reuse it until it falls apart. Don't throw it away after one sort of use. And try to be creative with kind of things that you've got at home. You can make your own bags. They're pretty simple. You can sew them together. Just buy a bag for life. These days in the UK, you can buy one bag that is never going to break. It's really well made. It might cost like £4 or £5, but it will last you forever. You never need to buy another one.
Right. Okay, so anyone got any questions out there or anything they want to ask Susie?
Let's have a sip of tea.
We're talking for 50 minutes. Any questions? Has this given you hopefully some information that you can go back and reflect on? Marsha, did you want to say something or type something? No questions yet? Hi, Marsha.
Hi. Sorry, I have lost. Yeah. Hi. My question is, Susie, are there any organizations that are focused on informing the general public about what sustainability, recycling, or what upcycling is? Because since we are in the industry, we are aware of it, but the general public, people who are not involved in the industry, they are not so informed of what really sustainability is. So are there any maybe institutes or organizations that focus on really making the public aware of it?
In terms of recycling or just generally sustainability?
Sorry?
Do you mean in terms of recycling or
Yes.
generally just sort of sustainability?
Generally on sustainability, but then there are so many misconceptions on that upcycling is sustainable, whereas single-use plastics, you cannot really recycle them. But there are so many misconceptions about it.
Yeah, I mean, there are many. I can't think of one website in particular that just focuses on recycling, but there are sort of many sort of organisations like the Ethical Trading Initiative and various others that kind of promote sort of sustainability and work with kind of designers and people within the industry to try and kind of improve working conditions, etc. So there are many sort of like organizations like that, but you've actually kind of come up with quite a good question, because I can't think of one in particular that just focuses on recycling, but I can do a bit of research for you, and if I find one, I'll let you know. I'll let Becca know. And she can pass on the information.
Thank you.
I mean, on my website, I have talked about sort of recycling a little bit. It's one of the projects we used to do with our students. Actually, we used to get them to what we call deconstruct garments. So take other garments apart and then reconstruct them into something else. And a lot of sort of secondhand or pre-loved clothing shops are actually doing this themselves as well now. So they're kind of what they call is remaking things. Yeah, so we're creating something new out of something old. And yeah, I think it is sustainable because it saves it from going into landfill.
Thank you.
I think, as far as, you haven't been to Sri Lanka, Susie, and I think Sri Lanka has such a potential to be a sustainable island.
Right.
One, there's nothing really imported here. So there's a huge import tax on any goods from outside.
Okay.
Therefore, a lot of the fashion that I've seen, that I've bought, that I've worn is made here. It's dyed here. And it's very transparent. So I think that the kind of like, people don't understand globally yet what Sri Lankan fashion is. But I think that it could be somewhere and a place where people can develop this sustainable idea, because
it sounds like it's got the right infrastructure. Yeah.
The right infrastructure. Yeah.
So I mean, if you can keep things local, and you can keep the real problem with the fashion industry is that the supply chain is so complex, and sort of like the bigger organizations kind of lose sight of what's happening within the supply chain, so they don't really know what's happening at the bottom end, which is where the kind of garment workers, where they're working and the conditions, because quite often they might put an order in and then that order then ends up going and being subcontracted to another factory. And the organization that have sort of put the order in will have no idea about the conditions or what's going on in that factory, so they kind of lose control of it if it's too big. But if it's small and it's sort of local, and you can manage that much easier, and you can ensure that the right conditions are set with the smaller organization. It's just when it gets too big and complex, it's really difficult.
Yeah, we don't have Zara, we don't have Primark. So out you guys out there, the biggest problem really is like a store called Primark that we have in the UK. That's the biggest fast fashion baddie. Zara is all over the world, but it's not here. I think the nearest one is probably Singapore. So I don't think there is that many kind of fast fashion brands here. Again, I think it's just an opportunity for Sri Lanka to kind of take hold of this and say, this is what we do. We can do sustainable fashion and promote it globally.
I mean, as long as you can get hold of the fabrics, that's the main thing, because that was one of the issues in Vietnam, was that everything was imported from China. So to try and find sustainable fabrics, for me, it took me over a year to find somewhere I could buy sustainable silk, and it was made in small quantities by a small community, and it was really expensive. So that was kind of the issue. You want to sort of balance what people are willing to pay, in terms of sort of the cost of the fabric, but you want good design as well. So I mean, it sounds like there's an opportunity there to sort of to develop the industry from within.
Definitely. Okay, so any more questions? Okay, well, so just to conclude, I want you to go off and reflect about this talk and have a think about your own sustainable footsteps and what you can do to reduce your plastic waste as individuals, with your families, as consumers. And it's very difficult at the moment because we are in a lockdown. Anything you buy is come from the supermarket, and the supermarket wrapped everything in plastic. And usually if I go to the supermarket, I take my own bag. So I'm very upset about that, because I think it's a complete waste.
But I think it is, but I guess they're probably doing that for the health reasons. So absolutely.
But there's kind of bags and bags and bags, and you don't have any control over it. So let's just kind of like digest what we've heard tonight and just think about our own actions, and you know, can we pass on information to our families or and our friends, and you know, just make small changes to make a big difference.
Could be the campaigners of the future.
Yay! So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and thank you so much, Susie Potts. It's been lovely to see you.
It's a pleasure.
And you've
Anytime.
got the whole of the afternoon in the UK left to go and enjoy. So go and enjoy yourself. Hope it's sunny. You can go out as well. So enjoy.
I wish the sun was shining. It's not. So unfortunately, I won't be doing that. Never mind.
Go out.
I have to wait to come and visit you.
Yeah, come. Yeah, she's going to come and visit. So you'll see Susie again. So thank you, everybody, and good evening. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.